was smart, independent, and lived quietly, until one day she vanished without a trace. But the moment a detective stepped into her empty home, everything changed. He wasn't just looking for a missing person. He was about to uncover something much bigger than either of them imagined. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The rain fell in steady sheets against the cobblestones of Boston's Beacon Hill, turning the gaslit streets into rivers of amber light. Detective William Ashford stood beneath the awning of a haberdashery, his dark overcoat dampened at the shoulders, his gray eyes fixed on the three-story brownstone across the narrow street. It was November of 1897, and the city had grown colder than usual for the season. He had been a detective with the Boston Police Department for 7 years now, and in that time, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about this case unsettled him in ways he could not yet name. The missing persons report had crossed his desk 3 days ago, filed by a concerned neighbor who claimed that Miss Eleanor Whitmore, a young woman of 26 years, had not been seen entering or leaving her residence in over 2 weeks. William was a tall man, standing well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of his earlier years working the docks before he joined the force. His dark hair was touched with premature silver at the temples, and his face bore the kind of quiet strength that inspired confidence in those who knew him. He was known among his colleagues as thorough, patient, and possessed of an unusual ability to see connections where others saw only coincidence. The neighbor who had filed the report, a Mrs. Davison, had been quite insistent. She lived in the adjacent brownstone and claimed that Miss Whitmore had always been regular in her habits, taking her morning constitutional at precisely 9 o'clock each day, rain or shine. When those walks ceased abruptly, Mrs. Davison had grown concerned. She had knocked on the door multiple times, receiving no answer. The curtains remained drawn. No lamplight flickered in the windows after dark. William crossed the wet street, his boots splashing through shallow puddles. The Whitmore residence stood silent and imposing, its dark windows like closed eyes. He climbed the stone steps and raised the brass knocker, letting it fall 3 times against the polished wood. The sound echoed hollowly within. No answer came. He tried again, waiting with the patience that had served him well in his profession. Still nothing. William stepped back and examined the facade. The building was well maintained, the kind of residence that spoke of modest wealth and good breeding. Nothing appeared amiss from the outside, yet he felt that familiar prickle at the back of his neck that told him something was very wrong here. "Detective Ashford?" a voice called from the neighboring stoop. Mrs. Davison stood there, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders against the rain. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes that now held genuine worry. "Have you had any luck?" William descended the steps and approached her. "Not yet, ma'am. You say you haven't seen Miss Whitmore in 2 weeks. 16 days to be precise," Mrs. Davison replied. "I keep a diary, you understand. I noted the last time I saw her. It was a Tuesday morning, the 2nd of November. She was carrying a small parcel, wrapped in brown paper. She smiled at me as she always did, wished me good morning, and went inside. I haven't seen her since." "And you're certain she didn't leave?" "Perhaps to visit family?" Mrs. Davison shook her head emphatically. "Eleanor has no family, detective. Her parents passed some years ago. She lived alone. She was a translator, worked from home mostly, translating French and Italian documents for various law firms and businesses. Very bright girl, very kind. It's not like her to simply vanish without a word." William made notes in the small leather-bound notebook he always carried. "Did she have many visitors? Friends? Callers?" "Very few. She kept to herself, though not from unfriendliness. She was simply private. I would occasionally see a messenger delivering documents, or once in a while she would receive a gentleman caller, though always quite proper, always in the afternoon with the door left ajar, as is appropriate." "Do you know the name of this gentleman?" "I believe his name was Mr. Carlyle, Benjamin Carlyle. He works at one of the law firms that employed her services. Hartwell and Associates, I think. He seemed a respectable sort." William underlined the name. "Mrs. Davison, I'm going to need to gain entry to the residence. Do you know if anyone has a spare key?" The elderly woman hesitated. "I do, actually. Eleanor gave me one some time ago in case of emergencies. She said I was the only person in Boston she truly trusted." Mrs. Davison's eyes glistened with emotion. "I hope nothing terrible has happened to her, detective. She's such a dear girl." "Let's not assume the worst just yet," William said gently, though his instincts told him to prepare for exactly that. "Would you retrieve the key for me?" Mrs. Davison nodded and disappeared into her home, returning moments later with a brass key on a simple ring. She handed it to William with trembling fingers. "Please find her, or at least find out what's become of her." "I intend to, ma'am." William returned to the Whitmore residence and inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and the door swung inward with a soft creak. He stepped into the entrance hall, immediately struck by the stillness of the place. The air was cool, but not cold, suggesting the furnace had been kept running, at least minimally. "Miss Whitmore?" he called out. "This is Detective William Ashford of the Boston Police. I'm entering your home to check on your welfare." Silence answered him. The entrance hall was tastefully decorated with dark wood paneling and a small table bearing a silver tray for calling cards. Several unopened letters lay scattered on the floor beneath the mail slot, bearing postmarks from the past 2 weeks. William gathered them carefully, noting they were mostly business correspondence and a few personal letters. He moved deeper into the house. The parlor to his left was neat and orderly, furnished with a green velvet settee, 2 matching chairs, and a pianoforte against the far wall. Books lined built-in shelves, most of them in French and Italian. A translation dictionary lay open on a writing desk as if someone had set it down mid-work and simply walked away. The dining room showed no signs of recent use. The kitchen, however, gave him pause. A teacup sat on the counter, still containing the dried remnants of tea. A half-eaten piece of bread had gone stale on a small plate. It appeared Miss Whitmore had been interrupted during a simple meal. William climbed the stairs to the second floor, his footsteps echoing in the quiet house. 3 doors opened off the landing. The first revealed a washroom, clean and undisturbed. The second was clearly a guest room, unused and perfectly made up. The third door led to what was obviously Miss Whitmore's personal chamber. He pushed it open slowly, not knowing what he might find. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the gray afternoon light. William crossed to the window and pulled the drapes back, allowing pale illumination to flood the space. The bed was made, covered with a quilt in shades of cream and rose. A wardrobe stood against one wall, and a dressing table with a mirror occupied the corner. But it was the desk by the window that caught his attention. Papers were strewn across its surface, and an overturned ink bottle had left a dark stain across several documents. William approached carefully, studying the scene. It appeared someone had been working at this desk when something had caused them to leave in haste, knocking over the ink in the process. He examined the papers. Most were translations in progress, legal documents concerning property transfers and business contracts. But one sheet, stained at its edge with black ink, contained writing in a different hand. The script was hurried, almost frantic. "They know about the documents. I cannot stay here. Forgive me for the deception, but it is the only way to keep everyone safe. Do not look for me. E." William read the note twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in his notebook. This changed everything. Miss Whitmore had not been taken against her will. She had fled. But from what? And why? He searched the rest of the room methodically. In the wardrobe, he found most of her dresses still hanging, though a few were missing, along with a traveling cloak he could see the outline of in the dust. She had taken only what she could carry. This was not a planned departure, but a flight. In the bottom drawer of her desk, hidden beneath a stack of blank paper, William found a leather portfolio. Inside were copies of documents that made his breath catch. They were property deeds and financial records concerning a railway expansion project in western Massachusetts. But something about them seemed irregular. Names had been altered, dates changed. These were forgeries, or at least copies of forgeries. William sat back in the desk chair, his mind racing. Eleanor Whitmore had somehow come into possession of evidence of fraud, likely through her work as a translator. Someone had discovered she had these documents, and she had run rather than face whatever consequences that discovery might bring. But who? And where would a young woman alone, with limited resources, hide herself? He descended the stairs and let himself out, locking the door behind him. Mrs. Davison appeared at her window, and he nodded to reassure her, though he had more questions now than answers. Back at the police station, William went directly to his small office on the second floor. He lit the gas lamp on his desk and spread out the documents he had taken from Eleanor's home. The forgeries were sophisticated, the kind of work that would require access to official seals and insider knowledge of railway company operations. Working late again, Ashford? Sergeant Thomas Brennan appeared in the doorway, a thick-set man with a graying mustache and the jovial manner of someone who had seen too much to take most things seriously. What's got you so absorbed? William looked up. Missing person case. Except she's not exactly missing. She ran. Brennan entered the office and peered at the documents. Railway fraud? That's a nasty business. You remember the Colchester scandal 2 years back? 3 men went to prison, and 2 others fled the country. I remember. This looks similar, but I can't tell yet who the players are. William tapped the note Eleanor had left. She wrote that they know about the documents. Plural. This is organized. You think she's in danger? I think she believes she is, which amounts to the same thing. A woman alone, hiding somewhere in the city or beyond. Probably frightened and running out of money. William stood and reached for his coat. I need to speak with someone who knew her. A Mr. Benjamin Carlyle at Hartwell and Associates. At this hour? It's nearly 7 o'clock. Then I'll find his home address. This can't wait, Tom. If she's in danger, every hour matters. Brennan nodded, understanding in his eyes. You need help. You let me know. I will. Thank you. William consulted the city directory and found Benjamin Carlyle's address listed as a fashionable apartment building on Commonwealth Avenue. The rain had lessened to a drizzle as he made his way through the evening streets, gas lamps flickering to life as lamplighters made their rounds. The building where Carlyle resided was elegant, with a doorman who eyed William's badge with the practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to discretion. Mr. Carlyle is in, sir. 4th floor, apartment 4B. William climbed the carpeted stairs and knocked on the designated door. It opened after a moment to reveal a man in his early 30s, well-dressed even in his evening attire, with sandy hair and sharp blue eyes that held a mixture of surprise and wariness. Mr. Benjamin Carlyle? Yes. I'm Detective William Ashford, Boston Police. I need to speak with you about Eleanor Whitmore. The man's face went pale. Is she... Has something happened to her? That's what I'm trying to determine. May I come in? Carlyle stepped aside, ushering William into a well-appointed sitting room. Please, sit. I've been worried sick about Eleanor. She hasn't answered any of my letters in over 2 weeks. I went to her home, but there was no answer. I didn't know what to do. William settled into a leather chair and withdrew his notebook. How well do you know Miss Whitmore? Quite well, I think. We've worked together for nearly 3 years. My firm, Hartwell and Associates, employs her regularly to translate documents for our international clients. She's brilliant at it, speaks 4 languages fluently. Carlyle ran a hand through his hair. But beyond the professional, I care for her a great deal. I had hoped in time to ask permission to court her properly. When did you last see her? The 31st of October. I brought her a batch of documents to translate, French contracts for a client acquiring property in Quebec. She seemed distracted, not quite herself. I asked if something was wrong, but she assured me everything was fine. He met William's eyes. I should have pressed her. I knew something was troubling her. Did she ever mention working on documents related to railway companies? Property deeds? Financial records? Carlyle frowned. Not to me directly, but Hartwell and Associates does handle some railway business. Why? William chose his words carefully. I have reason to believe Miss Whitmore came into possession of sensitive documents that may have put her in a difficult position. She left her home suddenly, leaving behind a note suggesting she feared for her safety. My God. Carlyle stood abruptly and began to pace. I should have known something was wrong. There was a man, about 3 weeks ago. I saw him watching her house when I was leaving. He seemed, I don't know, out of place. Too well dressed to be a common criminal, but something about him made me uneasy. Can you describe him? Tall, perhaps as tall as you. Dark hair, very neat. He wore a gray suit and carried a walking stick with a silver handle. When he noticed me looking at him, he simply tipped his hat and walked away. William made careful notes. Did you mention this to Miss Whitmore? I did. She became very quiet. Said it was probably nothing. But I could see she was frightened. Carlyle turned to face William, his expression anguished. Where is she? Is she safe? I don't know yet, but I intend to find her. William stood and handed Carlyle his card. If you remember anything else, anything at all that might help me locate her, send word immediately. Of course. Detective, please. When you find her, tell her that she's not alone. Whatever trouble she's in, I want to help. William nodded, recognizing the sincerity in the younger man's voice. I'll tell her. As William left the building and stepped out into the damp Boston night, He felt the weight of the case settling onto his shoulders. A brilliant young woman, alone and frightened, hiding somewhere in the vast expanse of New England, and someone, perhaps multiple someones, searching for her with unknown intentions. He would find Eleanor Whitmore. He had to, not just because it was his duty as a detective, but because something in her story had awakened in him a fierce protectiveness he had not felt in years. A woman who valued truth enough to risk everything, who had the courage to run rather than surrender what she knew was right. William Ashford walked through the rain-slicked streets, his mind already forming plans, already seeing the threads he would need to pull to unravel this mystery. Somewhere in this city or beyond, Eleanor Whitmore was waiting to be found, and he would not rest until he brought her home safely. The morning sun broke through the clouds as William Ashford sat in his office, surrounded by documents and notes that mapped out the railway fraud case. He had spent most of the night researching the Western Massachusetts Railway expansion project, and what he had discovered troubled him deeply. The project involved significant land acquisitions and substantial government funding, the kind of venture where fortunes could be made or lost based on the stroke of a pen. The forged documents Eleanor had possessed showed alterations to property deeds that would redirect profits from legitimate landowners to shell companies. Someone with access to both the railway company and the legal firms handling the transactions had orchestrated an elaborate scheme. The question was who and how had Eleanor stumbled upon it? William's door opened, and Sergeant Brennan entered carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folder. "Thought you could use this. You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't, not much anyway." William accepted the coffee gratefully. "What have you got?" "Railway company records. I called in a favor with a clerk I know at City Hall. The Western Massachusetts Railway expansion project is being managed by a consortium of investors, but the primary legal work is being handled by 3 firms. Brennan opened the folder and pointed to a list of names. Hartwell and Associates is one of them. William felt a chill run down his spine. "Carlyle's firm." "Right. The other 2 are Morrison and Webb and Blackwood Legal Services. But here's where it gets interesting." Brennan produced another document. "Morrison and Webb filed for bankruptcy 6 months ago. All their active cases were transferred to Hartwell and Associates. Consolidating control." William murmured. If someone at Hartwell wanted to manipulate the documents, taking over Morrison and Webb's caseload would give them access to everything they needed. "There's more. I did some digging into Blackwood Legal Services. It's a small firm, only 2 attorneys. One of them is a man named Jonathan Blackwood. Ring any bells?" William shook his head. "He's the cousin of Senator Howard Blackwood, who just happens to sit on the state committee that approved the railway expansion funding." The pieces were beginning to form a picture, and William didn't like what he saw. Political corruption, financial fraud, and now a missing woman who discovered the evidence. "This is bigger than I thought, which means Eleanor Whitmore is in more danger than she probably realizes," Brennan said grimly. "These people won't stop looking for her, and they have resources we can only guess at." William stood and grabbed his coat. "I need to speak with the senior partner at Hartwell and Associates. If there's fraud happening within his firm, he needs to know about it." "Be careful, Will. If he's part of it, you could be tipping our hand." "I know, but I need to see his reaction, gauge whether he's involved or being used." William paused at the door. "Keep digging into those railway records. Look for any properties that changed hands in the past year, especially if the transactions seemed rushed or unusual." The offices of Hartwell and Associates occupied the top 2 floors of a granite building in the financial district. William announced himself to the receptionist, a prim woman with steel-gray hair arranged in an elaborate style beneath a small hat adorned with peacock feathers. "I need to speak with Mr. Hartwell. It's a police matter." She eyed him with barely concealed disapproval. "Mr. Hartwell is very busy, Detective. Perhaps one of the junior partners could assist you. This concerns a potential fraud investigation. I need to speak with Mr. Hartwell directly." The woman's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of concern crossing her features. "One moment, please." She disappeared through a heavy oak door, returning a few minutes later. "Mr. Hartwell will see you now." William was ushered into a spacious office lined with law books and expensive artwork. Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat a man in his 60s, with silver hair, a neatly trimmed beard, and the kind of presence that commanded respect. Augustus Hartwell rose to greet him, extending a hand. "Detective Ashford, my secretary said this concerns a fraud investigation. How can I help you?" William shook his hand and accepted the offered seat. "I'm investigating the disappearance of Eleanor Whitmore. I believe she may have discovered evidence of fraud related to the Western Massachusetts Railway expansion project, and that discovery may have put her in danger. Hartwell's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened with interest. Miss Whitmore is missing? I wasn't aware. She's done excellent work for us over the years. What kind of evidence are you referring to? William produced copies of the forged documents he had found. These appear to be altered property deeds and financial records. Someone with access to your firm's files created these forgeries. Miss Whitmore, in her capacity as a translator, somehow obtained copies. Hartwell examined the documents carefully, his face growing darker with each page. These are certainly forgeries, and sophisticated ones at that. The seals look authentic, but the modifications are clear once you know what to look for. He set the papers down and met William's gaze directly. Detective, I can assure you that if this fraud is happening within my firm, I knew nothing about it. I've built my reputation on integrity over 30 years. I won't have it destroyed by criminals operating under my name. William studied the older man's face and believed him. Then we may have a common interest. I need to find Miss Whitmore before whoever is behind this does. And you need to identify who in your organization has been manipulating these documents. Agreed. Hartwell stood and moved to a filing cabinet, withdrawing a thick folder. These are all the files related to the railway project that our firm has handled. I'll go through them personally. But detective, you should know something. About a month ago, our file room was broken into. Nothing appeared to be stolen, but several cabinets had been forced open. We assumed it was a failed burglary attempt. Or someone making copies, William said. Miss Whitmore worked from home. If she had been given documents to translate and noticed irregularities, she might have started investigating on her own. That would be consistent with her character. Eleanor is remarkably intelligent and has a strong sense of justice. Hartwell returned to his desk. There's something else you should know. One of my junior partners, a man named Gregory Sutton, resigned suddenly 2 weeks ago. He claimed a family emergency required him to move to New York, but it struck me as odd. He left behind active cases and departed with barely any notice. William felt the familiar tingle of intuition. What did Sutton work on? Primarily property law and contract negotiations. He was one of the lead attorneys on the railway project. I need his home address and any information you have about where he might have gone. Hartwell wrote down the information and handed it to William. Find Eleanor, detective. And when you do, tell her she has my full support. If she's been trying to expose this fraud, she's been protecting not just herself, but the integrity of this firm and everyone who works here honestly. William left the office with a clearer picture of the conspiracy. Gregory Sutton was likely the inside man at Hartwell and Associates, working with Jonathan Blackwood and possibly others to manipulate the railway project documents. When Eleanor discovered the fraud, Sutton had fled, but his associates remained active and dangerous. Back at the station, William found Brennan waiting with more information. I've been going through property records like you asked. I found something interesting. There's a small estate about 40 miles west of here, in the town of Millbrook. It changed hands 3 times in the past year, each time to a different shell company. The property sits right along the proposed railway route. Let me guess, William said. The sales prices were inflated? Dramatically. Someone bought low from the original owner, then sold high to the railway company, pocketing the difference each time. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in profit from a single property. Multiply that by dozens of properties along the route, and you have a fortune. William studied the map Brennan had spread across his desk. Millbrook, that's remote, surrounded by farmland and forest. If Eleanor wanted to disappear, it would be a good place to hide. You think she went there? I think it's worth investigating. If she was smart enough to uncover this fraud, she might have been smart enough to hide in plain sight, right in the middle of the area where the crimes were being committed. William gathered the documents into his leather satchel. I'm taking the afternoon train to Millbrook. Want company? No, stay here and keep monitoring any developments. If Sutton or Blackwood makes a move, I need to know immediately. The train journey to Millbrook took William through rolling countryside dotted with farms and small villages. As the locomotive chugged westward, he reviewed everything he knew about Eleanor Whitmore. She was intelligent, resourceful, and brave enough to run rather than be silenced. But she was also alone, probably frightened, and running out of options. He found himself wondering what kind of woman would risk everything for the truth. Most people, faced with such danger, would have simply destroyed the evidence and claimed ignorance, but Eleanor had kept copies, had hidden them carefully, and had fled when discovery became inevitable. There was a strength in that choice, a moral courage that William deeply admired. The town of Millbrook was smaller than he had expected, little more than a main street with a general store, a church, a small hotel, and a handful of houses. William disembarked at the tiny station and made his way to the hotel, a two-story building with a weathered sign that read Millbrook Inn. The proprietor was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a welcoming smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Looking for a room?" "Actually, I'm looking for someone. A young woman traveling alone. Would have arrived about 2 weeks ago. Dark hair, well-spoken, probably keeping to herself." The woman's expression became guarded. "Are you family?" William showed his badge. "I'm Detective William Ashford from Boston. I'm trying to help her. She may be in danger." The proprietor studied him carefully, as if weighing his words. Finally, she nodded. "There's a woman matching that description staying in the cottage behind the inn. She paid for a month in advance. Cash. Keeps to herself, like you said. Hardly comes out except to buy food from the general store." William's heart quickened. "Is she there now?" "I believe so. Haven't seen her leave today." The woman hesitated. "She seemed frightened when she arrived. I didn't ask questions. Figured everyone deserves privacy. But if she's in trouble, I want to help. You've already helped more than you know. Thank you." William walked around the inn to a small cottage nestled among a grove of birch trees. Smoke rose from the chimney, and a dim light glowed in the window. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her, and knocked gently on the door. "Miss Whitmore, my name is William Ashford. I'm a detective from Boston. I'm here to help you." Silence. Then a soft voice, trembling slightly. "How do I know you're really a detective? How do I know they didn't send you? Your neighbor, Mrs. Davison, gave me the key to your home. I found the documents you left behind, the evidence of the railway fraud. I know about Gregory Sutton and Jonathan Blackwood, and I know you're frightened." William kept his voice calm and steady. "But I also know you're brave, Miss Whitmore. Brave enough to run, brave enough to protect the truth. Let me help you finish what you started." Another long pause. Then the sound of a lock turning. The door opened a few inches, and William found himself looking into the face of Eleanor Whitmore. She was beautiful in a way that took his breath away. Delicate features framed by dark hair that had come loose from its pins, intelligent brown eyes that held both fear and determination, and a bearing that spoke of grace even in these desperate circumstances. She wore a simple dress, wrinkled from travel, and her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the door. "You're really a detective?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am, and I've been looking for you since Mrs. Davison filed a missing person report. May I come in? We have a great deal to discuss." Eleanor hesitated, then stepped back, allowing him to enter. The cottage was small but clean, with a fireplace, a simple bed, a table, and 2 chairs. Papers were spread across the table, and William recognized them as additional copies of the railway documents. "I didn't know what else to do," Eleanor said, closing the door behind him. "When I realized what those documents meant, when I understood that people were being cheated out of their land and their money, I knew I had to keep the evidence safe. But then Mr. Sutton came to my house. He demanded I give him all the copies I had made. He said if I didn't, I would regret it." "What did you do?" "I gave him some of the copies, the ones I had in my desk, but I had hidden others, the most important ones, in a place he would never think to look." She moved to the fireplace and reached up into the chimney, withdrawing a leather pouch wrapped in oilcloth. "I kept these, and then I ran, because I knew he would come back, and next time he might not just make threats." William took the pouch carefully. "You did the right thing, Miss Whitmore. These documents are evidence of a major fraud conspiracy. With your testimony and these records, we can bring the people responsible to justice." Eleanor sank into one of the chairs, and for the first time since William had arrived, he saw tears in her eyes. "I've been so frightened. I didn't know who to trust. Didn't know if the police might be part of it too. So I came here, to this place where the fraud was happening, thinking it was the last place they would look for me." William pulled the other chair close and sat down, his voice gentle. "You can trust me, Eleanor. I give you my word, and you're not alone anymore. We're going to face this together." She looked up at him, and something passed between them in that moment, a connection that transcended the circumstances of their meeting. William saw not just a frightened woman in need of protection, but a remarkable person of courage and principle. And Eleanor, looking into his steady gray eyes, saw someone she could finally, truly trust. "Tell me everything," William said. "From the beginning. How did you first discover the fraud?" Eleanor took a shaky breath and began to speak, and as the afternoon light faded into evening, she told him her story while William listened, occasionally making notes, but mostly just being present, a solid and reassuring presence in her small sanctuary. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the birch trees. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows, a tall man in a gray suit carrying a walking stick with a silver handle, who had followed the detective from Boston and now knew exactly where Eleanor Whitmore had been hiding. Eleanor's story unfolded slowly, each detail painting a clearer picture of the conspiracy she had unwittingly uncovered. She explained how 3 months earlier, she had been translating a series of French documents for Hartwell and Associates when she noticed discrepancies in the property descriptions. Being thorough by nature, she had cross-referenced the documents with public records and discovered that parcels of land were being described differently in French contracts than they were in the English versions filed with the county. "At first I thought it might be simple translation errors," Eleanor said, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea William had made for her. "But the mistakes were too consistent, too deliberate. Someone was intentionally misrepresenting property boundaries and ownership to inflate values and redirect profits." "When did you realize the scope of what you had found?" William asked. "When I started comparing documents from different time periods. I saw the same properties changing hands multiple times, each sale to a different company. But when I researched those companies, they all traced back to the same small group of men." Eleanor stood and retrieved several pages from her pile of documents. "Jonathan Blackwood, Gregory Sutton, and a third man I couldn't identify at first. His name appeared on several incorporation papers as Samuel Pierce." William's attention sharpened. "Samuel Pierce? I haven't come across that name yet." "That's because it's an alias." Eleanor's eyes met his. "I did some investigating of my own, very carefully. I went to the county recorder's office and examined the original signatures on the incorporation documents. Then I compared them to signatures on other legal filings. Detective Ashford, Samuel Pierce is actually Senator Howard Blackwood, Jonathan Blackwood's cousin." William felt a chill run through him. A sitting senator directly involved in the fraud elevated this from a criminal case to a political scandal that could reach the highest levels of state government. "Do you have proof of this?" Eleanor nodded and produced several documents, laying them side by side on the table. The signatures were nearly identical, with the same distinctive flourish on the capital letters. "I'm not a handwriting expert, but I've worked with enough legal documents to recognize patterns. It's the same man." "This is why they're so desperate to silence you," William said quietly. "You're not just threatening a fraud scheme. You're threatening a senator's career and possibly his freedom." "I know." Eleanor's voice was barely audible. "That's why I ran. When Mr. Sutton came to my house that day, he wasn't alone. There was another man with him, the one who had been watching my house. He didn't say much, but the way he looked at me," she shivered. "I knew they wouldn't stop at threats if I didn't cooperate." William reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. The gesture was spontaneous, born of a desire to comfort and protect. Eleanor didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled slightly, accepting the offered strength. "I won't let them hurt you," he said firmly. "We're going to expose this fraud, and we're going to do it in a way that keeps you safe. But we need to be strategic. These men have power and resources. We need evidence that's ironclad and allies we can trust absolutely." "I don't know who we can trust," Eleanor said. "If a senator is involved, who knows how far the corruption reaches? Augustus Hartwell, for one. I spoke with him this morning. He's furious that his firm has been used for fraud and he wants to help. Sergeant Brennan at the police department is another. He's been my partner for years and I'd trust him with my life." William paused. "And there's someone else who's been worried about you. Benjamin Carlyle." Eleanor's expression softened. "Benjamin? He must think terribly of me for disappearing without explanation. On the contrary, he's been desperately worried. He cares for you a great deal." William watched her face carefully, aware of a small pang of something that might have been jealousy, which he immediately pushed aside. His duty was to protect Eleanor, not to entertain inappropriate feelings. "Benjamin is a good man," Eleanor said quietly. "He's been a true friend to me, but I couldn't risk telling him what I had discovered. The less he knew, the safer he would be." Before William could respond, a sound outside made them both freeze. Footsteps, careful and deliberate, approaching the cottage. William immediately stood and moved to the window, peering through the curtain. Two figures were approaching through the gathering darkness, their forms silhouetted against the lamplight from the inn. "We have company," he said quietly. "Stay behind me." The knock on the door was hard and commanding. "Miss Whitmore, we know you're in there. Open the door. We just want to talk." William recognized the voice from Carlyle's description. This was the man who had been watching Eleanor's house in Boston. He reached for his revolver, a Colt police positive he always carried on duty, and positioned himself between Eleanor and the door. "This is Detective William Ashford of the Boston Police," he called out. "Identify yourselves and state your business." A pause, then a different voice, smoother and more cultured. "Detective, my name is Jonathan Blackwood. I'm an attorney. Miss Whitmore has documents that belong to my firm. I'm here to retrieve them. This is a civil matter, not a criminal one. If it's a civil matter, you can file a proper claim through the courts. Leave now, or I'll arrest you for trespassing and harassment." "You're making a mistake, Detective." Blackwood's voice hardened. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. This involves matters far beyond your jurisdiction. My jurisdiction is protecting citizens from threats and intimidation. You have 10 seconds to leave this property." William heard murmured conversation outside, then footsteps retreating. But he didn't relax his guard. Men like Blackwood didn't give up easily, especially not when they were protecting a conspiracy of this magnitude. "They'll be back," Eleanor whispered. "With more men, with more resources. We can't stay here." William knew she was right. Their position was too exposed, too isolated. They needed to get back to Boston, to allies and safety. But the last train had already departed, and traveling by road at night would make them vulnerable to ambush. "The innkeeper," William said suddenly. "She seemed sympathetic to you. Do you trust her?" "Mrs. Fletcher?" "Yes, I think so. She's been very kind, never asking intrusive questions. Stay here and lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. I'm going to speak with Mrs. Fletcher and arrange alternative transportation." Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Please be careful. They might be watching." William looked down at her hand on his arm, then into her worried eyes. "I promise I'll be careful, and I promise I'm coming back for you." He slipped out of the cottage and made his way cautiously back to the inn, keeping to the shadows. Mrs. Fletcher was in the kitchen, and her eyes widened when she saw him. "Detective, I saw those men approach the cottage. I was about to send my husband to check on Miss Eleanor. She's safe for now, but we need to leave tonight. Is there any way to arrange transportation to the nearest larger town? Somewhere we can catch a train to Boston in the morning?" Mrs. Fletcher thought for a moment. "My brother has a farm about 2 miles from here. He has a wagon and good horses. If you can get to his place safely, he'll take you to Brookfield. There's an early morning train from there to Boston. Can you send word to him without arousing suspicion? My son can ride there on his bicycle. Those men won't pay attention to a 12-year-old boy." Within the hour, everything was arranged. Mrs. Fletcher's son returned with word that the wagon would be ready and waiting on the back road behind the cottage at midnight. William returned to Eleanor and explained the plan. "We'll have to move quietly and quickly," he said. "Pack only what you absolutely need. The documents are the priority." Eleanor worked efficiently, gathering her papers and a few personal items into a small traveling bag. William watched her move around the cottage, struck again by her grace and composure under pressure. She was frightened, certainly, but she didn't allow that fear to paralyze her. There was steel beneath her gentle exterior. "I never imagined my work as a translator would lead to something like this," Eleanor said as she secured the last of the documents. "I always thought of myself as someone who dealt with words on paper, not dangerous conspiracies." "You're remarkably brave," William said. "Most people would have looked the other way, convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. You chose differently." Eleanor met his eyes. "My father was a judge before he passed. He always said that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I couldn't do nothing, not when I knew what was happening. Your father would be proud of you." A soft smile touched her lips. "I hope so. He valued truth above everything else. It cost him politically sometimes, but he never compromised his principles." They waited in tense silence as the hours passed. William positioned himself by the window, watching for any signs of Blackwood or his associate. Around 11 o'clock, he saw a movement near the inn. 2 men, possibly more, taking positions that would allow them to watch both the cottage and the main road. "They're staking us out," he told Eleanor. "They expect us to try to leave. That's why the back road is our best option." At 1:45, William extinguished the lamp, plunging the cottage into darkness. They waited for their eyes to adjust, then slipped out the back door, moving as quietly as possible through the birch grove. The moon was hidden behind clouds, which worked in their favor, but it also made navigation treacherous. William led the way, one hand holding Eleanor's, the other ready on his revolver. They moved slowly, testing each step to avoid snapping branches or rustling through dry leaves. Behind them, the cottage sat dark and seemingly empty. They had nearly reached the back road when a voice called out from the darkness. "Going somewhere, detective?" William spun, pulling Eleanor behind him. A match flared, illuminating the face of the tall man with the silver-handled walking stick. Up close, William could see he was in his 40s, with cold eyes and a cruel smile. "My name is Marcus Devine," the man said casually, lighting a cigar. "I work for people who don't appreciate interference in their business affairs. You've been very troublesome, Detective Ashford, and Miss Whitmore has been even more so. If you're threatening us, you should know that my department knows exactly where I am and what I'm investigating. Anything that happens to us will be traced directly back to your employers." Devine chuckled. "Do you really think that matters? Senator Blackwood has connections that reach far beyond your little police department. By the time anyone starts asking questions, you and the lady will have simply disappeared. Tragic, really. A detective who got in over his head and a frightened woman who ran into the wilderness and got lost." William raised his revolver. "Step aside." "Or what? You'll shoot me? That would be murder, detective. And while I'm a criminal, you're supposedly a man of the law." Devine's smile widened. "You won't shoot. You'd be surprised what I'll do to protect an innocent woman." For a long moment, they stood in frozen tableau. Then, from the darkness beyond Devine, came the sound of a wagon approaching and a gruff voice calling out, "Anyone need a ride?" Devine turned, distracted for just a second. It was all the opening William needed. He lunged forward, striking Devine across the jaw with his revolver. The man staggered back, dropping his cigar. William grabbed Eleanor's hand and ran toward the wagon where Mrs. Fletcher's brother sat holding the reins. "Get in, quick!" the farmer shouted. They scrambled into the back of the wagon as Devine recovered and began shouting for his associates. William heard answering calls from the direction of the inn. The farmer snapped the reins and the horses bolted forward into the darkness. Behind them, men emerged from the shadows, but the wagon was already pulling away, its wheels clattering on the rough road. William kept his revolver drawn, watching their back trail, but pursuit didn't materialize. Either Blackwood's men didn't have horses readily available, or they had decided discretion was the better part of valor when facing an armed police detective. Eleanor sat beside him in the wagon bed, her bag clutched to her chest, breathing hard from the exertion and fear. William put his arm around her shoulders, feeling her trembling. "It's all right," he said softly. "We made it. You're safe." She leaned into him, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me. I was running out of money, running out of hope. I thought I might have to destroy the documents just to survive. But you didn't. You kept fighting. That took tremendous courage." The wagon rattled through the night, carrying them away from danger and toward whatever came next. William held Eleanor close, aware that somewhere in the past few days, his feelings toward her had shifted from professional concern to something deeper and more personal. He admired her strength, her integrity, her grace under pressure. And holding her now, feeling her heartbeat gradually slow from frightened racing to normal rhythm, he realized he cared for her in a way that went far beyond his duty as a detective. Eleanor lifted her head and looked at him in the darkness. Even with only starlight to see by, William could make out the delicate lines of her face, the intelligence in her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing me, for protecting me, for being exactly the kind of man I hoped existed but wasn't sure I'd ever find." William's throat tightened with emotion. "Eleanor, But she placed a gentle finger against his lips. "Not yet. Not until this is over and we're truly safe. Then we can talk about what comes next." He nodded, understanding. There would be time later for the things they both felt but couldn't yet say. For now they had evidence to present, criminals to expose, and a conspiracy to unravel. The wagon carried them through the remainder of the night, and as dawn broke over the Massachusetts countryside, They arrived in Brookfield. The farmer helped them down and wished them luck. William purchased tickets for the early train to Boston, and as they boarded, he felt Eleanor's hand slip into his. They were going to face this together. And when it was over, when justice had been served and Eleanor was no longer in danger, there would be time for the future they were both beginning to imagine. The train whistle blew, and they began the journey back to Boston, back to where everything would be decided. The train pulled into Boston's South Station as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the bustling platform. William helped Eleanor down from the railway car, his hand steady at her elbow as they navigated through the crowd of travelers, vendors, and porters. Despite the sleepless night and the danger they had escaped, Eleanor held herself with quiet dignity, though William could see the exhaustion in the delicate shadows beneath her eyes. "We need to go directly to the police station," William said as they emerged onto the street. "Sergeant Brennan will have prepared a safe room where you can stay while we coordinate with the district attorney's office. With your testimony and the documents, we can move quickly to make arrests before Blackwood and his associates have time to flee or destroy evidence." Eleanor nodded, clutching her bag close. "Do you really think we can stop them? A senator, attorneys, men with so much power and influence? The law is supposed to be above power and influence," William replied firmly. "And I know people who still believe in that principle. Augustus Hartwell, for one. He's already agreed to testify about the irregularities in his firm. With his reputation and standing, his word will carry significant weight." They hired a hansom cab, and as the horse clip-clopped through the morning streets, William found himself acutely aware of Eleanor sitting beside him. In the close confines of the cab, he could smell the faint lavender scent of her hair, could see the way the morning light caught the fine bones of her face. She had been through so much, had risked everything for the truth, and yet she remained unbowed. The police station was already busy with the day's activities when they arrived. Sergeant Brennan looked up from his desk and immediately stood, relief flooding his weathered features. "Thank God you're both safe. When you didn't telegraph last night, I was worried." His eyes moved to Eleanor. "Miss Whitmore, I presume? Welcome. You're among friends here." Eleanor managed a small smile. "Thank you, Sergeant. Detective Ashford has told me I can trust you." "You can trust him too, miss. Will's one of the best men I know." Brennan gestured toward the stairs. "I've prepared a private room upstairs where you can rest and refresh yourself. There's water for washing, and I had my wife send over some clean clothes that should fit you reasonably well." "You're very kind," Eleanor said, her voice wavering slightly with emotion. As Brennan escorted Eleanor upstairs, William went directly to his office and began organizing all the evidence they had gathered. The forged documents, Eleanor's notes and cross-references, the property records showing the shell companies, the handwriting comparison proving Senator Blackwood's involvement under an alias. It was all here, a damning portrait of corruption and fraud. He was so absorbed in his work that he didn't hear the door open until a familiar voice spoke. "Detective Ashford, I came as soon as I received your message." William looked up to see Benjamin Carlyle standing in the doorway, his face drawn with worry and hope in equal measure. "Is it true? You found Eleanor? Is she safe?" "She's here, and she's safe," William confirmed. "She's upstairs resting. She's been through a difficult ordeal, but she's remarkably strong." Carlyle moved into the room, his hands clenched at his sides. "I've been half out of my mind with worry. When you sent word that you'd found her, I could hardly believe it. May I see her?" William hesitated, aware of the complex emotions churning within him. He had no claim on Eleanor, no right to feel the possessive protectiveness that had taken root in his heart. Carlyle was a good man who genuinely cared for her. Yet the thought of stepping aside, of watching another man claim the woman he had come to admire so deeply, cut deeper than he wanted to admit. "Of course," he said finally. "But Carlyle, you should know that she's going to be at the center of a major criminal prosecution. Her testimony will bring down a senator and expose a massive fraud. She'll need support, not just today, but in the weeks and months to come." "She'll have it," Carlyle said without hesitation. "Whatever she needs, whatever I can do to help her through this, I will. I care for Eleanor deeply, Detective. I have for quite some time." William nodded, pushing his own feelings aside. His duty was to Eleanor's safety and to justice, not to his own heart. "I'll take you to her." They found Eleanor in the small room Brennan had prepared, standing by the window and looking out over the city. She had washed and changed into the dress Mrs. Brennan had provided, a simple gray wool that somehow made her look even more beautiful. When she turned and saw Carlyle, her face lit with genuine pleasure. "Benjamin, I'm so sorry I disappeared without explanation. You must have thought the worst of me." Carlyle crossed the room quickly and took her hands in his. "I thought only that you were in trouble and I couldn't help you. Eleanor, when William told me you'd discovered fraud and had to flee for your safety, I was devastated that you felt you couldn't come to me. I couldn't risk involving you," Eleanor said softly. "The less you knew, the safer you would be. These men are dangerous, Benjamin. They've already threatened violence." "Let them try," Carlyle said with uncharacteristic fierceness. "They'll have to go through me first." William watched the exchange, saw the affection between them, and felt his heart constrict. He cleared his throat. "I'll leave you two to talk. Eleanor, we'll need to go over your testimony soon, but take some time to rest first." He left the room and returned to his office, where he threw himself into the work of building the case. Within the hour, Augustus Hartwell arrived, accompanied by his personal attorney. The senior partner's face was grim with determination. "Detective Ashford, I've reviewed all the railway project files from my firm. Gregory Sutton had his hands in every aspect of the transactions. He manipulated documents, forged signatures, and used his position to facilitate the entire fraud scheme." Hartwell placed a thick folder on William's desk. "I've prepared a complete accounting of every irregularity I could find. More importantly, I've secured testimony from 3 other attorneys in my firm who can corroborate that Sutton was acting suspiciously and pressuring them to expedite certain documents without proper review. This is excellent work, Mr. Hartwell. Combined with Miss Whitmore's evidence and testimony, we have enough to bring charges against everyone involved. There's something else you should know," Hartwell continued. "This morning, I received a visit from a representative of Senator Blackwood. He offered me a substantial sum of money to make this problem disappear, as he phrased it. He suggested that Miss Whitmore was mentally unstable and that her accusations were the delusions of a disturbed mind." William's jaw tightened. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that I had already contacted the authorities and that if he didn't leave my office immediately, I would have him arrested for attempted bribery." A thin smile crossed Hartwell's lips. He wasn't pleased, but he left. "I suspect Senator Blackwood is beginning to realize that his carefully constructed conspiracy is collapsing around him." Over the next several hours, William coordinated with the district attorney's office. District Attorney Thomas Crawford was a man of unimpeachable integrity who had built his career on prosecuting corruption. When William laid out the evidence, Crawford's eyes gleamed with the fervor of a man who had found his calling. "This is exactly the kind of case that shows why our institutions matter," Crawford said, studying the documents spread across the conference table. "A senator, attorneys, businessmen, all conspiring to defraud honest landowners and steal public funds, and one brave woman who refused to look the other way." He looked at William. "Is Miss Whitmore prepared to testify before a grand jury?" "She is, but I need your assurance that she'll be protected. These men have already made threats against her life. She'll have round-the-clock protection from the moment she steps into that courtroom until every defendant is behind bars. You have my word." By late afternoon, everything was in motion. Arrest warrants had been prepared for Senator Howard Blackwood, Jonathan Blackwood, Gregory Sutton, and Marcus Devine. Additional warrants would follow as the investigation expanded to include other conspirators. Crawford had convened an emergency grand jury session for the following morning. William returned to the station to brief Eleanor on what would happen next. He found her in Brennan's office with Carlyle sitting close beside her, holding her hand. They looked up as he entered, and William felt that familiar pang of loss, even as he maintained his professional demeanor. "The district attorney will present the case to a grand jury tomorrow morning," William explained. "You'll need to testify about how you discovered the fraud, what documents you found, and what threats you received. It will be difficult, but Crawford is excellent at making witnesses feel comfortable." Eleanor took a deep breath. "I'm ready. I've come this far. I'm not going to falter now." "You're incredibly brave," Carlyle said, squeezing her hand. William continued, "Once the grand jury returns indictments, arrests will be made immediately. Senator Blackwood will undoubtedly try to use his political connections to avoid prosecution, but Crawford is confident that the evidence is overwhelming. The senator will face justice like any other criminal." "What happens after the arrests?" Eleanor asked. "There will be a trial, probably several trials, You'll be a key witness in all of them. It won't be easy, Eleanor. The defense attorneys will try to discredit you, to make it seem like you misunderstood what you saw or that you had ulterior motives. But with the physical evidence and the corroborating testimony from Hartwell and others, the truth will prevail. Eleanor nodded slowly. My father always said that the truth has a weight to it, a gravity that eventually pulls everything toward itself. I have to believe that's true. It is true, William said softly, and you've proven it by your courage. That evening, arrangements were made for Eleanor to stay in a secure boarding house, run by the widow of a former police captain. 2 officers would maintain watch throughout the night. Carlyle insisted on accompanying her, promising to stay in the parlor to provide additional protection. As William watched them leave together, Carlyle's hand protective at Eleanor's back, he felt Brennan's presence beside him. You care for her, the sergeant said quietly. It wasn't a question. William didn't deny it. It doesn't matter what I feel. She deserves happiness, and Carlyle is a good man who can give her the life she deserves. Maybe, or maybe you're selling yourself short. You're the one who found her, who protected her, who believed in her when she had nowhere else to turn. That means something, Will. It means I did my job. It means you did more than your job, and we both know it. Brennan clapped him on the shoulder. Don't be so quick to step aside. At least give her the choice. William spent a restless night in his small apartment, reviewing the case file and preparing for the grand jury session, but his mind kept drifting to Eleanor, to the way she had looked at him in the wagon when she said there would be time to talk when this was over. Had he imagined the warmth in her eyes, the unspoken promise in her words? The grand jury convened at 9 o'clock the next morning in the imposing courthouse that dominated the center of Boston's legal district. Eleanor arrived with Carlyle and 2 police escorts, and William met them in the hallway outside the grand jury room. Are you ready? He asked Eleanor. She was pale but composed, wearing an elegant navy dress that Mrs. Brennan had procured for the occasion. I'm ready. I've been preparing for this moment since the day I first discovered those forged documents. It's time to finish it. You'll do wonderfully, Carlyle assured her. Just tell the truth, exactly as it happened. District Attorney Crawford emerged from the grand jury room and approached them. Miss Whitmore, the grand jurors are ready to hear your testimony. Detective Ashford will accompany you into the room, as he's the investigating officer. Mr. Carlyle, you'll need to wait here. Carlyle squeezed Eleanor's hand one more time. I'll be right here when you're finished. William escorted Eleanor into the grand jury room, a wood-paneled chamber where 23 citizens sat in tiered rows, ready to determine whether sufficient evidence existed to bring criminal charges. For the next 2 hours, Eleanor testified with clarity and precision, walking the grand jurors through her discovery of the fraud, the threats she received, and her decision to flee rather than surrender the evidence. Crawford questioned her methodically, establishing the chain of events and the authenticity of the documents. The grand jurors listened intently, several of them taking notes. When Eleanor described Marcus Devine's threat in the woods outside Millbrook, William saw anger flash across several faces. Finally, Crawford turned to the grand jury foreman. Do the members of the grand jury have any questions for Miss Whitmore? A few jurors asked for clarification on technical points, which Eleanor answered with the same careful precision she brought to her translation work. When the questions ceased, the foreman nodded to Crawford. The grand jury will deliberate. Eleanor and William were escorted to a waiting room while the grand jury considered the evidence. Carlyle joined them, and they sat in tense silence. William found himself studying Eleanor's face, memorizing the delicate curve of her cheek, the way her hands folded calmly in her lap, despite the anxiety she must be feeling. After 45 minutes, Crawford appeared in the doorway, a broad smile on his face. The grand jury has returned indictments on all counts against all defendants. Arrest warrants are being executed as we speak. Eleanor sagged with relief, and Carlyle immediately put his arm around her shoulders. It's over. You did it, Eleanor. You brought them to justice. We all did it together, Eleanor said, looking at William. I couldn't have done this without Detective Ashford. He saved my life and gave me the courage to see this through. William felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. You had that courage all along, Eleanor. I just helped you find a safe path to use it. Over the following days, the arrests dominated the newspapers. Senator Howard Blackwood was taken into custody at his home, his protests of innocence falling on deaf ears as evidence of his involvement under the alias Samuel Pierce became public knowledge. Jonathan Blackwood and Gregory Sutton were arrested at their respective residences, and Marcus Devine was captured trying to board a ship bound for Europe. The scandal rocked Boston's political and legal establishment. 3 other attorneys were subsequently arrested as the investigation expanded, and dozens of fraudulent property transactions were identified and unwound. The legitimate landowners who had been cheated received restitution, and the Western Massachusetts Railway Expansion Project was placed under new management with strict oversight. Through it all, William found himself working closely with Eleanor as they prepared for the upcoming trials. Carlyle remained a constant presence at her side, attentive and devoted. William watched their relationship deepen, saw the way Carlyle looked at Eleanor with open adoration, and tried to be happy for them both. 2 weeks after the grand jury indictments, Augustus Hartwell invited William, Eleanor, and Carlyle to dinner at his home to celebrate the successful prosecution. It was a small gathering, just the 4 of them and Hartwell's wife, a gracious woman who immediately took Eleanor under her wing. After dinner, as they sat in Hartwell's library with coffee and brandy, the senior partner raised his glass in a toast. To justice, to courage, and to the remarkable young woman who refused to compromise her principles, even when it put her life at risk. Eleanor, you have my deepest admiration and respect. They all drank to the toast, and Eleanor's eyes shimmered with emotion. Thank you, Mr. Hartwell, and thank you for believing me and supporting the investigation. Without your testimony and the evidence from your firm, we might not have prevailed. I should be thanking you, Hartwell replied. You prevented my firm's name from being permanently tarnished by association with fraud. Speaking of which, I have a proposal for you, Miss Whitmore. Your skills as a translator are exceptional, but your analytical abilities and attention to detail are even more impressive. I would like to offer you a position at Hartwell & Associates, not as an independent contractor, but as a full employee. We're creating a new position specifically for you, one that combines translation work with document review and fraud prevention. You would help ensure that what happened with Sutton never happens again. Eleanor's eyes widened. Mr. Hartwell, I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous. It's not generosity. It's good business sense. You have talents that my firm needs. Hartwell smiled. And Benjamin has already assured me that having you work at the firm regularly would be no hardship for him whatsoever. Carlyle blushed slightly, but didn't deny it. It would be wonderful to work alongside you every day, Eleanor. If you're interested in the position, of course. Eleanor looked between them, and William saw the moment she made her decision. I would be honored to accept, Mr. Hartwell. Thank you for this opportunity. Later that evening, as the gathering broke up and guests prepared to depart, William found himself alone with Eleanor in Hartwell's garden. The November air was crisp and cold, and Eleanor had wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. They stood beneath an arbor covered in bare vines, the sky above them brilliant with stars. You're going to thrive at Hartwell & Associates, William said quietly. It's the perfect position for you. It is, Eleanor agreed. I still can't quite believe everything that's happened. A month ago I was alone and terrified, running for my life. Now I have friends, a meaningful career, and a future I'm excited about. She turned to face him fully. And I owe so much of that to you, William. You gave me hope when I had lost it. You protected me when I was defenseless. You believed in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself anymore. William felt his heart hammering in his chest. They were alone in the garden, the lamplight from the house casting a soft glow over Eleanor's face. She was looking at him with such warmth, such gratitude, and something more that he hardly dared to name. Eleanor, he began, then stopped, unsure how to put his feelings into words. She stepped closer, and he could smell the lavender in her hair, could see the pulse beating at the base of her throat. In the wagon that night, I said we would talk when this was over. I think we should talk now. About what? William asked, though he knew perfectly well what she meant. About this connection between us, about what we feel but haven't said. Eleanor's voice was soft but steady. I care for Benjamin. He's been a wonderful friend, and he's a good man. But what I feel for him is affection and respect. What I feel for you is something different, something deeper. William's breath caught. Eleanor, you should know that Carlyle cares for you deeply. He wants to court you properly, to build a life with you. He can offer you security, respectability, a place in society. And what can you offer me? Eleanor asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. William looked into her eyes, and all his carefully constructed restraint crumbled. Honesty. Loyalty. A man who sees you not as someone to be protected and sheltered, but as an equal partner. Someone who admires your strength as much as your gentleness, your courage as much as your kindness. He took a breath, and a love that goes deeper than anything I've ever felt before. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. That's what I was hoping you would say, because that's what I feel too, William. From the moment you came to find me, when you looked at me not with pity, but with respect, I felt something shift in my heart. You didn't try to solve my problems for me. You gave me the tools and support to solve them myself. You treated me like someone capable and strong, even when I was frightened and overwhelmed. You are capable and strong, William said, reaching out to gently cup her face in his hands. You're the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Then prove it, Eleanor whispered. Stop being so noble and self-sacrificing. Stop assuming I should choose Benjamin because he's the safer option. Ask me what I want. William's thumbs traced gentle circles on her cheeks. What do you want, Eleanor? I want you. I want the man who saw me as I truly am and loved me anyway. I want the detective with the kind eyes and the brave heart who risked everything to keep me safe. She placed her hands over his. I want you, William Ashford, if you want me too. I do, William said, his voice rough with emotion. God help me, Eleanor, I do. I've wanted you since the moment I saw you standing in that cottage doorway, frightened but unbroken. I've loved you since I heard your story and understood the depth of your courage. I love you now, and I'll love you for the rest of my life if you'll let me. Eleanor's smile was radiant. Then kiss me, you foolish man, before I lose patience with all this talking. William laughed, a sound of pure joy, and then he was kissing her beneath the November stars, tasting the salt of her happy tears, feeling her arms wrap around his neck as she pulled him closer. The kiss was everything he had imagined, and more, sweet and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathless, Eleanor rested her forehead against his. I should speak with Benjamin. It's not fair to let him harbor hopes that I can't fulfill. Are you sure about this? William asked. About us? You're giving up the life Carlyle could give you. I'm choosing the life I want instead of the life others think I should want, Eleanor corrected gently. There's a difference. Benjamin will understand. He's a good enough man to want me to be happy, even if it's not with him. They returned to the house hand in hand, and Eleanor quietly requested a moment alone with Carlyle. William waited anxiously in the library, wondering if she would change her mind, if Carlyle would somehow convince her that he was the better choice. But when Eleanor emerged 20 minutes later, Carlyle was with her, and while there was sadness in his eyes, there was also acceptance. He approached William and extended his hand. Take care of her, Ashford. She deserves the best. William shook his hand firmly. I know she does. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of her. I believe you will. Carlyle managed a smile. She's right, you know. You see her the way she deserves to be seen. I wanted to protect her, to shelter her. You want to stand beside her as an equal. That's what she needs. After Carlyle departed, William and Eleanor stood together in the lamplight, planning their future. William would speak with Eleanor's landlord about terminating her lease and finding her a proper apartment in a safer neighborhood. They would court properly, allowing sufficient time for their relationship to develop before making formal plans for marriage. But they both knew, with the certainty that comes from genuine connection, that marriage was their eventual destination. The trials began in January of 1898 and continued through early spring. Eleanor testified in each one with the same clear precision she had shown before the grand jury. William sat in the courtroom for every session, a steady presence that gave her strength. Senator Howard Blackwood was convicted on 17 counts of fraud and sentenced to 15 years in prison. His political career was destroyed, his reputation in ruins. Jonathan Blackwood received a similar sentence, while Gregory Sutton, who agreed to testify against his co-conspirators, received a reduced sentence of 7 years. Marcus Devine, convicted of attempted assault and intimidation of a witness, was sentenced to 10 years. Through it all, Eleanor and William's relationship deepened and strengthened. He introduced her to his colleagues at the police department, where she was welcomed with respect and admiration. She introduced him to Mrs. Davison and the other neighbors from Beacon Hill, who were delighted to see her happy and settled. In April, as spring flowers began to bloom in Boston's parks and gardens, William proposed properly, kneeling in the same garden where they had shared their first kiss. Eleanor said yes without hesitation, and they were married in June in a small ceremony attended by close friends and colleagues. Augustus Hartwell gave Eleanor away, as her father was no longer living to perform that honor. Sergeant Brennan stood as William's best man, beaming with pride at his friend's happiness. Even Benjamin Carlyle attended, having found peace with the outcome and genuine friendship with both William and Eleanor. As they exchanged vows in the sunlit church, promising to love and honor each other through all the days of their lives, William looked into Eleanor's eyes and saw his entire future reflected there. A future built on truth, courage, and the kind of love that comes from truly seeing another person and choosing to walk beside them as an equal partner. The reception was held in Hartwell's garden, and as the afternoon sun slanted through the trees, William and Eleanor danced together, oblivious to the other guests, lost in their own private world. "Happy?" William asked, holding her close. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Eleanor replied. "A year ago I was alone, translating documents in a quiet house, thinking that was all my life would ever be. Now I have meaningful work, true friends, and a husband I love with all my heart." "How did I get so fortunate?" "We both got fortunate," William said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We found each other when we both needed it most. And now we get to spend the rest of our lives being fortunate together." As the sun set over Boston, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, William and Eleanor Ashford stood together in the garden where their love had first been declared, surrounded by people who cared for them, beginning their life as husband and wife. The case that had brought them together became a landmark in Massachusetts legal history, a testament to the power of one person's courage to expose corruption and demand justice. But for William and Eleanor, the true legacy was not the convictions or the reforms that followed. It was the life they built together, founded on mutual respect, unwavering support, and a love that had been forged in the fires of adversity and emerged stronger than steel. They had found each other in the darkness, and together they had walked into the light, and they lived happily, purposefully, and together for all the days of their lives.